The murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and the countless other Black people who have been murdered by the state across the diaspora has put us in the midst of, I won't call it a revolution, but it is a political uprising where you see hundreds of thousands of people across the world taking it to the streets to combat anti-Black policies. And this is not new. You know, I blinked out a little bit, but that is not new. Marching and protesting is not new to Black people, and this is not the first time we will have to do this, and unfortunately, I don't believe that this will be the last. When there is political unrest, for me, I think that there are always three main groups who are at the forefront of organizing. Black women, usually at the forefront, our students, our youth, who I'm always so happy and proud to see, and then lastly, our artists, which I think now we can kind of argue if we need a celebrity voice when it comes to this. Of course, there's their platform. You see on social media people asking celebrities to just shut their mouths and open their purses. But historically, our artists like Curtis Mayfield, Fela Kuti, Bob Marley, have used their art to create the soundtrack to the revolution, to create the soundtrack of the struggle. I think we can add Lil Baby to that list. Good job. I'm very proud of him. If you have not listened to his new single where he made the video at the protest in Atlanta, please go listen, because his voice is just as valid and just as important when it comes to art that is coming out to talk about what is going on currently. When we talk about the history of protesting and what that looks like across the diaspora, we see chants, we see people playing music, a lot of pushback for people dancing, doing the cha-cha slide with police, but music has always, 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 and will forever be a part of Black liberation. I think it's really important to look at the relationship between music and protest, especially in Black history. And no one to me is a greater example of that than South Africa. Today is a national holiday in South Africa called Youth Day, which commemorates the June 16th, 1976 Soweto Uprising, where more than 10,000 students took to the street to protest anti-Black educational policies. The apartheid government said that only 176 students were murdered, but estimates range up to about 500. South African artist Hugh Masekela and Miriam Makeba, also known as Mama Africa, are to me two of the most prolific artists ever. Two of the most prolific artists to come out of the continent. Both were exiled from the country for speaking their mind through their art. So today we are going to focus on Youth Day and the art of protesting. My name is Monique Ameyo Constance, and this is Theory. I think it's really important to understand the politics of what prompted the Soweto Uprising. So to understand that, let's go all the way back to 1948, which is when the apartheid government was enacted officially in South Africa. If you're not aware, apartheid is just this really fancy political term for racial segregation, but it is now backed by the government. South Africa was colonized by the Dutch, descendants of the Dutch and descendants of the English. And so this is where you have your really small, they make up a small amount of the population, but they are the ruling class. So when we talk about white supremacy, it infiltrates all aspects of our lives, socially, politically, and in this case, educationally. So in 1953, the government enacted the Bantu Education Act, which supported racial segregation in schools, and it also school was not mandatory for young South Africans to attend, but if they did want to attend school, their family had to pay for all of their books, their family had to pay for the construction and the maintenance of the buildings, and all of these things were offered for free to white students. And this is 1953. So in 1974, we have the Africans Medium Decree, which mandated that Black students could no longer learn or speak their native languages in the school system. They were only allowed to speak Afrikaans, which is the language of the Boers, the descendants of the Dutch and the English, or they could speak English. The only time that native African languages were allowed to be spoken were in religious classes, and that is for a very particular reason, to indoctrinate Christianity into the minds of Africans in their own language. Cultural classes, and then physical education. So now you have not only just the stripping away of Black power in terms of policy and social construct, but now we're seeing that seep into the educational system, where the youth are now constricted from learning anything. And this was done very purposely. It was done with intent, because those in the government did not believe that Black people should be educated if they only saw them as working menial jobs. So what is the point of educating this population if they're not going to reach anything higher than a janitor or a housekeeper?
The children got a letter from the master. It said no more Xhosa, Sotho, no more Zulu. Refusing to comply, they sent an answer. That's when the policemen came to the rescue.
So after the Soweto uprising, the military and the state were still enacting violence. A few days later, it said that up to 300 kids below the age of 18 were shot or harmed or killed. Probably most famously is Hector Peterson, who was immortalized in the photograph by Sam Nzima. Hector was 13 when he was murdered by the state. And so all of this, the fact that an apartheid government was supporting the killing and the murdering of school children in their uniforms, outraged white people, right? And it's unfortunate sometimes, because a lot of times it's necessary for white people to be enraged, other white people to be enraged, before you start getting any real progress. And this also was not untrue for the Soweto uprising.
Soweto blues, Soweto blues, Soweto blues.
Hugh Masekela once said, "Because you cannot beat these people physically, you can scare the shit out of them with your songs," end quote. And that is, I think, the basis, not the basis, but it is an integral part of South African anti-apartheid demonstrations, especially through something called Toi Toi, which is a dance that was adopted from the Zimbabwe People's Revolutionary Army. Toi Toi was a method that protesters used to, one, keep themselves energized. It is a high energy dance chant where you'll see people, running with high knees, and they're rhythmically coming towards the army. They're rhythmically approaching the state, right? And a bunch of Black people singing and a bunch of Black people dancing scares white people. And so if you don't have the weaponry, if you don't have guns, if you don't have military tanks, at least we have our music. And so Toi Toi was a way for the youth to really put themselves in a space to have a small psychological advantage on the apartheid forces. So what does a post-apartheid South Africa look like today? I had the pleasure of sitting, or I guess Zooming, with Tumie Mokuena, a South African artist and filmmaker, where we discussed education, politics, and culture of South Africa and its newest generation.
My full name is Tumie Mokuena, and I was born in the Northwest province in a town called Mafikeng, and I was born in 1989. In August the 12th. I'm a student at UNO. I have a record company called Empire Records, and
All right.
Anything.
Okay, so we're around the same age. So you were born in 89, I was born in 88. So what would you say, as someone who went through the educational system? We understand that the apartheid system really changed the way that Black South Africans were able to continue their culture, continue their language. What is your opinion about the educational system for Black South Africans when you were in school, and then how you see it now?
Well, when I was in school, I'm matriculated. I finished grade 12 in 2007.
Okay.
So when we were in school, we didn't have too much problems with our medium of education. So I went to a private school. So at my school, we were offered African languages, only two though,
What were they?
Sesotho and Zulu. So those were the only two languages that were offered, and they were offered as second languages. Whereas English was offered as was like the main language of instruction. And then they also had Afrikaans, which is also a well-known language in South Africa that's also known to be a medium of instruction in universities, the traditional universities in South Africa, and the traditional high schools. So whereas the African languages in South Africa are only taught in usually rural high schools and primary schools, and in some public schools, whereas Afrikaans and English is more dominant in most schools in South Africa.
Was that a problem for you? Did you find an issue with that, or is that something that you found students found an issue with in terms of, I don't know, do you consider it being forced assimilation, or was that something where it was just the norm, so it wasn't anything to kind of protest about?
Well, we were at least given the option of having other African languages taught to us, whereas my parents were never given that option. And if they were taught in an African language, the school was probably not properly built, like the infrastructure wasn't so good, the quality of teachers weren't so good. So we were very lucky to have the type of educators that were teaching us, and the fact that we had African languages. I guess that's what they were fighting for in 1976, not to only be taught in Afrikaans, which wasn't our mother tongue. So for us to have a chance to be taught in our mother tongue was something that the past students didn't have a chance. So I think that was something that we could, as the new generation, appreciate.
Did you have mostly Black instructors, African?
Oh no! So because of my background, I went to a private school, so we had like white, all types of educators. But then, because my country is the majority is Black people, in other schools, the teachers were mostly Black educators. But then also as educators, they were not really equipped. That's why we also had a lot of teachers protesting also higher wages, better, more infrastructure, more facilities for the students, because there's a big problem in South Africa in smaller provinces where there's a lack of education, there's a lack of infrastructure, poor sanitation. So those are like problems and issues that the majority of the country is facing, whereas like people that are privileged do not have those problems. So
right. And do you think that the educational system, has it benefited you? Because I think, when we think about the educational system in America, especially what it's doing for poor students, Black and brown students, there's a lot lacking in terms of teaching identity, the type of literature that we're reading, the things that we're introducing to really get their minds where it needs to be. Do you feel like it was lacking, especially post-apartheid? You have this huge revolutionary moment, but then what happens after the revolution? And so do you think that those things that your parents' generation fought for, did it work? in the way that, you know, in the resulting of the educational system now?
I definitely believe that it did work, but then like to an extent, you know, like for example, um, the school codes of conduct in the majority of South African schools do not represent Black people properly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like a small thing like hair, right? How females and males, Black males, should how they should sport their hair isn't really in the code of conduct. So afros and like hair like mine was something that was asked to be straightened because it's not, you know, presentable.
Right.
Um, so you can imagine we fought, our parents fought for like education and everything, but when like just our Blackness, you know, our hair, something that we take pride in, is something that's not considered in the school code of conduct, you know, which caused a big movement in South Africa a couple of years ago, where female students at a high school called Pretoria Girls stood up to the educators there, because they were the only people that were singled out because of their hair and everything. So I guess the spirit of 76 is still like running throughout the country, which is awesome, because I can definitely say that the youth of South Africa are definitely fighters themselves. We have definitely fought for specific movements. Like another big movement that was huge in our country was the fees must fall. So one thing about South African students is that we do want an education, and it's just that a lot of people's families can't afford. So that was one of the things that was a key issue with education, because the people that want to have education can't afford it.
Right.
And that was really one of the pressing issues.
And that's really interesting to me when going back to the hair, because I remember that about the girls from Pretoria. And I think even here in Louisiana, there are issues with private schools and not wanting the girls to wear braids or afros. And this is kind of going away from the educational, but even having to signify someone as a Black South African, right? So even taking space that, you know, the Afrikaners are now considered African, that's interesting too, in terms of when it comes to teaching African history. What does that look like in a classroom? Because I think then when you have to now classify, well, I'm a Black South African, when really you're it, like, right? Like even having to put that Black in front of it is very interesting to me. So in terms of the history that's taught within the classrooms and how the students are still have that political spirit, what did that look like in your classroom space?
Well, in my classroom space, we weren't really taught Black culture or anything that had to, it was really an old school way of teaching. Like just we focused on like the Roman Empire, what happened in America. We didn't really focus on slavery and other things. It was really English history. Like when I say English, like what the British did, what the Romans did, America. It was little South African history, and if it's African history, it had to be what happened in apartheid. It never ever highlighted like how life was in Africa before the settlers. You know what I mean? Like how life really was for like South Africans then, learning the cultures. Like it was, we were never taught anything about our 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 cultures, our languages, you know, our leaders. We were just taught about what the white people wrote in the textbooks that were given in high school and primary. So.
And you know, I think even then, like even learning about what happened in the US, but not highlighting what's happening in South Africa, do you feel like the youth, your generation and below, have a connection to the diaspora? Do they look outwards, outside of South Africa to gain a sense of self? Or are they turning more to the South African indigenous culture to really understand who they are?
They definitely turn into what we have going on back home. I feel like as South Africans, we're very proud, a proud nation. I mean, we have 11 different languages. We actually just added sign language as one of our official languages.
Interesting. Okay.
So we are what is called a rainbow nation. So we definitely have international influences. We do definitely pay attention to what goes on in the rest of the world, especially America, because it's the number one nation in the world, I guess. So what
Yes.
goes on here really affects what happens around the world. You know what I mean? So we definitely pay attention to that, but we have embraced our Africanism. So that's never been questioned. We definitely a proud nation.
Good. Okay. So then, in terms outside of the classroom, when we talk about the arts and the culture, I've always believed that art reflects what's going on in the society. Where would you say the artistic scene is at currently in South Africa? What are Black South Africans creating at the moment?
Oh, it's beautiful right now for us. I mean, in the music scene specifically, hip hop has really grown in South Africa over the years. I mean, 2014 was a very big year for us. Me and a couple of other people that I know in the industry really took it upon us to really upgrade the quality of music and the songs that were being made. You know, we really embraced our languages. We had more of our songs that were Americanized. We really made them more South African. You know, we had a real culture change, you know, shift when it came to, like, you know, embracing our Africanism with our music. You know, I mean, we already had it in the dance. You know, we have, you know, these moves that originate from Africa, where you can see them in like popular music videos, even here. You know, like the Gwara Gwara, which is from Durban. You know, you could see it, you know, being done on social media. You know, and that's the beauty of social media, that it allows us as Africans, you know, to have a platform that we don't have to pay for, where we just have to create content and just upload it, and it gives us a chance to be known around the world, which is something that, you know, has really helped big artists in our country get their recognition. Recently, we just had Def Jam Africa recordings just come through. So that is something major, something that we never ever dreamed would ever happen, you know. But because of the spirit and the unity that we have amongst our musicians back home, we were able to propel an artist like Nasty C to be the first South African hip hop artist to be signed to Def Jam Africa. Def Jam, and for him to, you know, represent us. So our music scene has really changed. Our movie culture has also upgraded. I mean, we have Netflix in South Africa now. We have a great series that just got released recently, Blood and Water. Which
Yes. What is that? I just saw people talk. What is I like? Should I watch it? I haven't watched it yet.
You should. I mean, it's you know what we like about it also, because I'm also into film. We've been hungry for like a new narrative, you know, because South Africa is known for just certain things. You know, we do like movies that are based on apartheid, or like in Tsotsi, we're highlighting like the crime and everything that was going on in our country. Whereas with Blood and Water, we are looking at the let's say because it's set in Cape Town and it's set at like a private school, we get to see like how it is for like the new generation when it comes to schooling, like the social issues that they are dealt with, you know. So it's what's very nice about it, it's very current, you know, where we are known for highlighting our history more than anything. So I think that's what really brings people to.
And I like that you say that, because I think we do often, especially talking about South Africa, or just Black people in general, we cling to the sadness, we cling to the struggle, we cling to all of the hurt. But what are we doing now? And so I'm definitely going. Have you finished? Is it a series or a movie, Blood and Water?
It's a series, so it's like a 6-part series.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna watch it, and I think that's a very beautiful thing, is to show the African in her current state,
And
and
it's the only, I'm so sorry to cut you out. It's the only South African series that has a black lead role, and that has made like the top 10 around the world. You know, it's it's definitely, you know, a big thing for us right now. You
yeah,
know,
it's
especially because
super important.
yeah, yep.
And what do you see? Where do you see the art scene going? Because South Africa, I think, does have a name. It's accessible. I think as a country, South Africa seems accessible to people in terms of visiting Africa. As South Africans, as young South Africans are taking more and more hold of the culture, what do you project for what that looks like? Or what are your hopes for the art scene in South Africa?
Well, I'm happy with the way it's moving right now. I mean, we are very digitalized right now as the youth. At least we are very connected to what's going on. So the trends, we never miss a trend. I think like Africa right now, because a lot of people are coming to us for, let's say, the sauce. You
Mm.
know, a lot of people are coming for the juice. So one thing for sure, I know we would always, even though we do not have the same technological advances or like the rest of the world, but one thing for sure, we are rooted in culture, and I think it's the future is Africa. You know, I guess a thing that we can all be proud of is the fact that Africa, the narrative and the way people think of Africa is changing, not in a major way, but it's changing, and that's something that we can be proud of. You know, I guess in a couple of years, or we can really expect for South Africa, for Africa to be definitely a, a major key player in the world, really.
I agree. And I think it comes to also what you spoke about in terms of not only is the world's perspective of Africa changing, but the African's perspective of himself is
So,
changing. And you know, if we go back to the Soweto uprisings, 76, you see this identity, like this own Black identity. And it seems like it's just continued on in this newer generation. Do you find though that there are elements that kind of stick to assimilation? Are there groups who maybe reject that Black identity, or are we too much in I feel like there's too much going on to even like reject being Black, you know, like there's too much to like shy away from that.
no, it's definitely. I mean, I think being Black is the in thing, even though like there is really there's obviously that dark cloud that hangs over being Black, but then it's definitely still the in thing. You know what I mean? Like back home, we have a lot of let's say Caucasian people that have really embraced the African culture, and you can find like musicians. Like there's a popular artist back home called Costa Titch, white guy, raps in Zulu, you know, and his biggest song is a Zulu, like a song that is predominantly in Zulu, you know, and this is a white guy, you know, so it's nice to see like people embracing, like I know we Black people consider ourselves Africans, but it's nice to have white people in South Africa also considering themselves as Africans and embracing our languages and our cultures. I mean, we still have like, you know, white families that are aware of lobola, and they will also, you know, and lobola is dowry, like
Okay.
the payment, like
Okay.
payment of like when you want to wed. You know, we still we have people in our country where it's not Black people only, but other you know, cultures and stuff that also embrace our culture and customs. So it's something that has really changed over the years, and it's a beautiful thing to see.
I was gonna say, how do you feel about that? I think sometimes I really have to walk I don't know, I think there's a very thin line between understanding culture and then participating in another culture. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that? On a white man making a song in Zulu, on a white person experiencing these like marital traditions that are traditionally for Black Africans. What are your thoughts? Because I go in between. I think some things, for me, I think at least some things have to be sacred and remain, but then also you look at this idea of, okay, well, at least they're accepting it, but can they accept it? And if they accept it, does that mean they have to participate?
Well, participation is something else. I mean, like, I think they don't accept everything of ours. Like,
Mm-hmm.
slaughtering is definitely not something that they.
The animals, that's where they draw the line.
You gotta try the line. Like, you know how they love their animals. So it's like that's the line. That's real. But then, besides that, they definitely have embraced, being African. So the other, for me, it's really nice because we never had white people see us the way they see us right now, and also, like, especially in South Africa, because they were the minority, but then they dominated us, and it wasn't nice. It wasn't cool to be black, back in the days, at least now, if you have a white guy rapping in Zulu, and that shows a lot already, just him speaking an African, language is a big thing, where it was a language. I mean, our languages were never ever spoken, let alone taught, so for a person that's white to embrace that also is a beautiful thing. It shows that, we're definitely making progress.
Right. And do you see that a lot in this current generation in terms of there being a lot of allyship? Is it more of a mixed effort to progress the arts and the culture of South Africa? Or is it an effort of Black South Africans and then white people come in kind of when it's been, established and I'm not, and I hope this doesn't come off as like, I hate white people, but it's just very interesting to me in terms of being on the continent and being dominated by white people, and like just what that looks like. I think it's a little bit easier to digest in America where it's a predominantly white country, but looking at that on the African continent has just always been it's hard for me to reconcile, so yeah, I'm just very fascinated by that.
Well, with us, I mean, like, it goes down to history. There's some things in history it'll take ages for things to, like, change. Like, the power that the white people have back home is still there. They control the banks. They control the markets. Really. Yes, the government is black. Throughout Africa, the majority of the governments are black, but then they're really controlled behind the scenes by white powerful people. So it's something that it's going to take ages to change, but it's something that we live with. I think we just as black people we have found a way to live amongst that. As the majority you can imagine having to live amongst the minority, and they are still, like, they outrank us, really.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. I want you to tell me a little bit about your film company and the hopes that you have and what you're trying to do with film. And is that something where you're developing your film company here in the States, or will you go back home and start the development of production in South Africa?
I'm definitely starting out here. I have been in talks, so I'm actually right now going to be working with a gentleman called Damon Batiste. I don't know if you know their family. They are a musical family out here. So I've been lucky enough to have the Batiste family wanting to work with us because they have a great history with South Africa. They've been traveling in and out of South Africa for the past 20 years, and they are one of the peoples out here that really want to, bring African culture to America and also bring skills and expertise back home to help, develop the country. So that is something that I'm going to be collaborating with Damon Batiste on. Is definitely bringing African content to the States. And also when it comes to me making movies, I'm definitely going to be trying to rewrite the African narrative, and shed light on the stories that are not told. And also, try teach, the world really things that, they are not aware of, because there's only a few things that we are told, really, and there are things that are unsaid, and no one will ever know unless, some people speak up, and I'm one of those people that wants to, really shed light on our continent
Right. And
as a whole.
if there's one thing that you could have people know about South Africa, or the one impression that you would want most people to have about the country, what would it be?
Well, I want them to know that South Africa is a beautiful country. We have, we have tourism, and we have these beautiful landmarks and places that I guess the world can really want to come and see, because we have the cradle of mankind. We have, we got Table Mountain. We have beautiful places in the northwest that are rich in minerals, and the landscape is beautiful. There's just so much that people can come and see in South Africa that is not known, really. The only things that people really talk about when they talk about South Africa is Nelson Mandela, and they don't really know too much about on apartheid. They don't know too much about the beauty of the country, and
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I really want, or I encourage people to come and come and see for themselves.
Is that annoying to you that, like, you say South Africa and immediately people are like, yes, Nelson,
Of course,
Serafina.
but I'm yes, but I'm not. I'm not. I'm happy that we've had people like Mr. Nelson Mandela that have been able to put us on the map, single-handedly, and that's his legacy, and I think. There's a lot of countries around the world, and not a lot of the countries' names are even known,
Yeah.
And for us to be associated with Nelson Mandela all the time, it's not someone bad to be associated with. It's someone that really represented us well. So it's gonna take a while also for that narrative
I
to
don't think it's ever gonna go away.
it's never gonna go.
I don't think that one's
It's never gonna go.
I don't think it's ever going to go away. I think it's almost the same with, like, the United or Georgia and Martin Luther King or whatever.
Exactly.
Again, that's interesting, because I think, when we hold on to those narratives, it's like this kind of cloud that's over. It's like, yes, it's beautiful, but look at all this progress. And I feel crazy because this is a shirt that Benjamin gave me. I'm actually wearing Nelson Mandela on my shirt. So I don't know how ironic I'm being by talking about that. But, I think, no, I'm really, really excited, because I think that in terms of the quote unquote emerging African countries, South Africa is definitely high on the list. Ghana is high on the list. And so I'm very, very fascinated just in terms of what the Black South African is doing in the country. And I'm excited to see where it goes. Do you go home often?
I literally moved here last year.
Oh,
So,
okay. So you're new.
I'm very new. But then just quick background. My dad came to studied by Dillard actually in the
Okay.
80s, and so he was even part of a whole fraternity and everything. So he embraced his his trip out here. But then my dad went to Harvard also, and Columbia. My mom went to NYU and Berkeley. So my parents really instilled this thing of education,
Mm-hmm.
and having the opportunity to come and study here has really benefited me and my growth, my personal growth, and I'm very excited to be a contributing member of the community in a few years when I'm done with everything and able to take my skills back home.
What are your thoughts on America?
Well,
That's a very loaded question. It's like, tell
me
anything.
I'm very obviously with recent events like what happened with George Floyd, obviously those things are very uncomfortable, just being a black person, living here. I can only imagine if I had to be stopped, as a South
Right.
African, you know, with my accent, you know,
Good
it'll
luck.
just,
Good
you know,
luck.
that just that alone, you know, it's scary, you know, to just know that, you know, if they can treat their own countrymen like that, how will they treat me? You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So that's something that that scares me. But then I think besides that, America is definitely the land of the free and home of the brave. And I'm definitely enjoying my time out here. And I think there's just a lot of opportunities. And I'm just grateful to be able to compete on this kind of stage. You know,
Mhm.
I think if I can make it out here, I can make it anywhere. You
Yeah.
know, and that's the thing about America. That's like if you are able to, you know, conquer the states, you know, there isn't anything that can really stop you from, you know, conquering the
Mhm.
world.
And doing it.
Really, yeah, I'm doing
No,
the same. Yeah.
I agree. I agree. Well, Tumie, thank you so much for speaking with me today. I appreciate it. So definitely be on the lookout for the full episode. I'll send it to you. I'm going to be launching it on June 16th. So I will send it to you so we can share, and then I'll send you an email so I can get all of your social media, all of that.
Oh, okay. No, that's awesome. That's
Okay.
awesome.
Well,
And then I'll even send you like some music that I
yeah.
have. You know what I mean? Like even that can even tie in with like, you know, the 1976 uprising. I know you're going with the Soweto blues.
Hmm.
But then like, you know, there's that famous riot song, Asiba Sabi. Asiba. It's a very, very popular song
Send
that
it to
they
me. I would rather use something that's a little bit. I only know Soweto blues because I loved the Graceland album when I was
yeah.
every African
Oh,
Graceland
okay.
album.
No, for sure. No, that's a classic though. Like that goes. You see, people like Hugh Masekela, Miriam Makeba, other like because I'm into music, right? I really want to go into like and start making biopics of like Hugh Masekela, Miriam Makeba. You know, there aren't enough. There isn't even one story of any of our great musicians.
No.
Fela Kuti. There's too many of them. You know, there are too many of them. You
There are
know.
way too many, and what I like, it's interesting too that you're here in New Orleans because Hugh Masekela was here all the time, and you can hear a lot of the New Orleans jazz in his
Yeah.
music, but he's using it for like revolutionary purposes in South
Yes.
Africa. So like that movement of New Orleans to South Africa is really, really beautiful to me. Please make something about him. I love it. I love
Oh
him.
no, we have sampled bro Hugh Masekela. So many, like a lot of people have sampled him. He's definitely like, you know, one of the greatest. You know, I mean, I was told that, you know, uh, is it Louis Armstrong?
Hmm.
His first trumpet. You know what I mean? Like, you know, so that's beautiful. You know that, you know, Hugh Masekela, Miriam Makeba have definitely touched, you know, the American people and people around the world, really, you know, with their music and telling our story. And that's something we definitely appreciate. So I definitely just want to share the music that we have, the current music at home. And, but then with that, with the whole June 16, this particular riot song, I definitely want you to hear it. And then
Please.
maybe you'll probably even recognize it if you've seen a lot of movies that had to deal with apartheid and stuff. You'll probably see that, or you'll probably pick it up in the song. You'll hear like, oh, okay, I've probably seen this in this. So because my artist actually sampled it and we used it for a song, and it's because Asiba Sabi means we are not afraid of them. The song is called No Fear, and I think that's a perfect perfect song for for June 16. I mean, the youth of that generation weren't afraid to stand up, you know, whereas our fathers and mothers, while their mothers and fathers were, you know, at work, or they were not, you know, doing anything with their lives, really. You know, they were just angry at the man, whereas the students stood up, you know, and for them, and because of them, I'm over here. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm very grateful. You know, I'm very, very grateful. And we can never forget. You know what I mean? We can never forget. I mean, there's this beautiful image of that was done by this guy that just recently passed away. He was this young guy that actually reconstructed. You know, the famous picture of Hector Peterson when he was getting. So like now there's a beautiful picture that was redone. That actually won a Laurie Award back home, like one of these advertising awards.
Wow.
So it's a picture of Hector Peterson, you know, dressed in like you know, in like, you know, the clothes that you wear when you go and graduate, you know what I mean? And instead of the lady screaming like for help, like she's screaming for like in happiness that, you know, a little brother, like, so it's a beautiful image. I'll actually try to find that picture for you and attach it so you can see what I'm talking about. That literally represents like what the youth of 1976 did for us, you know. It's a beautiful image. You're like,
I would love to see it. And are there artists, I like try to cut the conversation short, but it's not, I want to keep talking to you. Are there, I'm like, we're not ending this. Are there artists though that you think have taken the baton from Hugh Masekela, from Mama Africa, who these people were exiled, could not come back to their country just for creating art that was speaking the truth? Who are those equivalents in South Africa now?
That's a tough one because we definitely have like great musicians like there's like Java, there's Amanda Black, you know, there's these musicians that really, because I don't speak Sizulu, I can't really understand what they're saying. But then what I'm told is that they are like, you know, are the ones that are in the forefront, I guess, keeping the word alive, you know. Whereas there's also like Thandiswa Mazwai, there's like old school South African artists that are, you know, keeping the baton. Whereas the youth aren't really, you know, focused on or trying to, you know, educate. You know, they're more about entertaining, you know. We are not really, you know, the messages in the songs are not the same, you know, over the years. I guess because we have our freedom and everything, I guess like now we just want to enjoy it. And we are definitely just going to be just talking about our current problems where, you know, they're not as major as the ones that our parents had, but then like, you know, there are problems, and those are things that, you know, the youth of today are basically, you know, shedding light on.
You know, and I agree. I think it's the same thing with most music now. There's no real revolutionary music because we perceive ourselves to be free. And so, you know, I'm just wondering like what needs to happen. Today is a very odd day because we see the burning in Minneapolis for George Floyd, but what needs to happen for more revolutionary music to come? And do we even need it? Like, are we past the point of needing revolutionary music to really push those of us who are concerned about it? Or should we just enjoy because at least we do have some freedoms? That's always like should the artist be political? Is it the job of the artist to be political? I think that's a back and forth that could go on.
Yeah, it can go on because I mean you'd hear musicians telling you that they're not politicians, you know. I mean they are role models, and there's things that they have to accept. You know, what they say really impacts, you know, us, you know, because I mean we're the people that support them, you know. So we definitely want them to represent us and to also stand up for certain causes. I mean, the great thing about our South African musicians is that they have aligned with a lot of with the ANC, you know. Some of them have aligned with the ANC and have, you know, pushed that agenda, you know. And with the EFF. The EFF has artists that they have, like, those are their go-to artists, you know, that represent, not that they represent their beliefs or anything, but then there's people that that they can rely on to, I guess, bring them people, like, you know, more supporters and stuff. It's not really like, you know,
they're pawns. You're being very nice about it.
I'm being very nice. It's bad.
They're pawns in the political game, which is everybody. And I think also to your point, you know, not everybody is meant to talk about politics. Not everyone has the range or the vocabulary or the experience. Just because you have a platform does not mean that you have the best voice to talk about what's going on. So that's interesting. I'm interested to see what comes out of South Africa. I'm interested to see the progression of the art. And to see like what that umbrella of apartheid, if it's going to lift, and what would be the new umbrella that people now relate South Africa to. So
that is something that I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, from people moving away from, you know, the apartheid, you know, narrative, you know, if that can just change for us, I think it'll help us, you know. I mean, we had the Truth and Reconciliation. I think we've done everything. We've done all the movies about apartheid. We had the truth, you know. We've done so much, you know. I think we just really, as South Africans, have to, you know, just tell a new narrative, you know, and I give more hope. I mean, we have great leaders now, great young leaders. I mean, we have Julius Malema, who's the leader of the EFF, radical, great mind, very outspoken, you know, and we need people like that stand up to corruption, you know, and we just need young, you know, in power. We need young people in power, you know, because they're the only people that can really represent us. I mean, their mindset is really on the same wavelength, whereas the older generation has the older, you know, mentality, you know, old school way of thinking, you know. So it's hard to really have the two, you know, they always work together. It's always clashing, you know what I mean? And it's tough. It's tough, but then the struggle continues.
Every day. The struggle, right on, brother.
You know, it does. It continues.